Regarding PDHs, you must be registered for the conference, and you must also be logged into the session with the same email you registered with. Then you must attend the session in its entirety to receive credit. We will track your attendance through the week for you. There is no PDH reporting on your part for the virtual conference. Certificates will be automatically emailed to the participants following the conference within 2 weeks. And finally, I do need to let you know for legal reasons that today's presentation is being recorded.
How you like me now?
I would like to introduce our speaker, David Webb of QMC. David, thank you for being here. I'll now turn it over to you.
Thanks, Dennis. Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining me. As Dennis said, this is session 8, root cause analysis, let's improve it. And I know that depending on where you are in the country, this may be lunchtime for you, so if you're putting lunch on hold a little bit, I appreciate it. And if you're just finishing up lunch, well, hopefully I can keep you awake just a little bit longer. So the agenda for today, these are the things we're going to talk about today. What exactly is root cause analysis? When is a root cause analysis truly needed? We'll touch on a few different root cause analysis methods out there, and we'll go over what effective root cause analysis have in common regardless of which you choose to use. Just some key words you're going to hear over and over today are nonconformance, corrective measure, corrective action request, and root cause analysis. By the way, each of these are officially defined and can be found in the glossary section of the AIC certification standard, AIC 207-16, which is soon to be the 207-20 as the new edition is going to be released June 1st. Terms and definitions, we're going to spend a lot more time today than you might expect talking about the vocabulary and the terms and definitions. The reason for this is, I think if they're not careful, people sometimes lose sight of what they're actually doing and being asked to do when they undertake performing a root cause analysis. So we're going to break these down a little in depth, hopefully to drive this home. The first term is nonconformance. You can see here what the AIC standard defines as a nonconformance. It's attributes of materials, consumables, fabricated or manufactured product, erected members, or processes that do not meet contract, regulatory, or internally defined requirements. And you can see here that I've highlighted the word attributes out of this. And that's because it's not defined in the standard, but I think it's a key, almost forgotten or hidden word when you see this definition. If you look up attributes in the dictionary, you get a few different things, but in the quality world, it's important to remember that attributes are measurable, testable properties of a system that are used to indicate how well that system satisfies the needs of its stakeholders. Now, I know you can all read, and that's a lot of words, so to make things a little bit easier, you can always think of a nonconformance as anything that doesn't meet a requirement, but it needs to be something that is measurable or quantifiable in some way. Next, we have corrective measure. This is on this slide on purpose because corrective measure applies to nonconformances. Corrective measure is a term we do find in the AIC glossary as the measure taken to bring a non-conforming product or process into conformance with specified requirements. But you might also have heard of this as a correction or immediate correction, and what have you. The key to remember, though, is this the action is taken to fix a nonconformance. Then we have corrective action. In all of my time as a quality auditor, and it's more than I'd like to admit, performing hundreds of audits, I think this might be the number one misused or misunderstood term, and a big reason why I wanted to harp on definitions today. Please note that corrective action is much different than corrective measure. A corrective action is what is undertaken to identify and eliminate the root cause of a service or process nonconformance to prevent its reoccurrence. The standard even tries to drive home this point in the glossary by further stating that corrective action is not repair, or rework of non-conforming product or process. But again, in my experience, far too many people confuse these two and combine these two, meaning of these two terms, and they definitely should not be. So although the next term is not in the glossary, as it should be self-explanatory, corrective action request, or CAR as it's often called, is quite simply the request that a corrective action be performed. It seems simple enough. The problem, I think, though, is that far too many people use the term CAR, and they lose sight of what they're really requesting. I'm not sure, but I think we probably have several quality auditors listening in today. So I would ask them especially to keep in mind that when you request someone perform a corrective action, that you're asking them and you're expecting them to get to the very root cause of a process or service non-conformance and take steps to prevent its reoccurrence. As we'll learn later in the presentation, an effective root cause analysis is quite an undertaking, and to request that someone perform one shouldn't be handed out without forethought. Not the least of which is, have I documented a service or a process non-conformance? Or have I documented an attribute of a product or an attribute of materials, etc., that might be better suited to a more immediate corrective measure than a full-blown root cause analysis? Now, I'm not trying to talk you out of doing a corrective action. Just the opposite. I think they're a great tool and they're a vital part of a quality management system. But as we're going to find out, when done properly, they take a lot of effort. And lastly, we see the definition of root cause analysis. That's a tool used as part of a corrective action to identify and address the root cause of the service or process nonconformance. And ideally, once the root cause is identified, it will be addressed to prevent the reoccurrence in the future. So this is just another way of stating the same thing. A root cause analysis is a systematic process for identifying the root causes of problems or events and an action plan to respond to them. You see the note there that a lot of companies will focus on just one factor when identifying a root cause. They often just scratch the surface, which can lead to an ineffective resolution if you're not careful. You definitely want to dig deeper.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Yes.
So root cause analysis, what exactly is it? Well, it's exactly what it sounds. It's a tool used to analyze a problem to get to the core of an issue. It's addressing or correcting a root cause should help to prevent the problem from coming back. It's an in-depth investigation into an event or a non-conformance. What it's not, it's definitely not a quick, simple process. A lot of times a cause will be determined only to find out that there's other causes that need to be addressed to fully prevent the problem from coming back. So when it comes to root cause analysis tools, there's several out there. In fact, if you do a Google search, it's going to bring up these and probably a lot more. You've got a Pareto chart, which is a bar graph to help identify significant issues. You'll see scatter diagram that plots separate data points to help look for trends. You may have heard of a FMEA or a failure mode and effects analysis. This can help identify where a process has failed. A fault tree can help you find causes at a more system level failure. And then we have the 5 whys, fishbone diagram, and the 8D report. For today's presentation, we're going to focus on just 3 of these tools. We're going to look at the 5 whys, fishbone diagram, and the 8D report. Why am I singling out these 3? Well, that's because these are the 3 examples AIC decided to use when they developed the corrective action request form that you'll see for AIC certified participants. Here's an example of a blank form, the CAR form. As you can see in the smaller print, these 3 things are singled out as quote-unquote helpful in arriving at the true root causes. But also, in addition to this being on the form, I'm a firm believer that it's much better to master 1 or 2 things rather than trying to be too many different things at once. That's true whether you're talking about sports or other things. I feel like it's a lot better to be great at one thing than so-so at 100 things. So these are the templates that we're going to use today to discuss things further. One thing to think about when you're deciding on a process to use for your root cause analysis is there really isn't one tool that's any easier or harder to utilize. As we'll hopefully learn today, they all have several things in common. And of course, they all have the same goal in mind, which is to get to a root cause. So a real world example. Here we have an example of an actual corrective action request that was left with an AIC certified participant sometime in the past. So in this case, the event or the problem or the nonconformance we're interested in is the finding. It says here, the finding is an effective some evidence that was cited. These are the specific items that were seen during audit that led the auditor to the conclusion that there is an issue significant enough to warrant requesting an in-depth investigation as to why. Why was the calibration program didn't address these things? The first process we're going to look at today is the 5 whys. And the first step to that is to establish a team. Remember from earlier slide, we saw that these are all brainstorming tools. And by definition, you really can't complete a brainstorming session with just a single person. So one process that works really well is to have a team already established that can be called together whenever corrective action is needed. A lot of times these are called car teams, or I've heard them called tire teams. But again, they're pre-established groups. And one really great side effect of that is it gets multiple employees involved in the process. It's a great tool for cross-training your employees. In a perfect world, these teams are made up of people from different areas of the company, such as quality and production, management, out on the shop floor. That way we get a full perspective of the entire company. And one last benefit of this approach is that a lot of times you can identify stars within the company that you can be groomed for advancement later on. So instead of one person doing it, one person, a lot of times this quality manager, but it really could be anybody, will act as a facilitator that will name a few folks to be on the team. And then that person, the facilitator, will plan and carry out the root cause analysis process. It's the facilitator's job to record all the ideas and ultimately carry out the plan to correct the issue. So here we have a case study using the 5 whys. For this, the team will start with our nonconformance. In our example, it's the calibration program has not yet been implemented. The facilitator asks the group why. Why was the calibration program missing these items and why was it not implemented? Well, the answer may be the personnel didn't review the procedure. Okay, why? Why was the procedure not reviewed? In this case, the answer was the internal audit wasn't as full and complete as it needed to be. Why not? Why was the internal audit incomplete? So the answer may be the auditors weren't trained in how to do audits properly. So here we have it, a potential root cause of the problem. So for this example, we're going to stop right there for a couple of reasons. First, this may very well be the root cause that can be remedied and prevent any future issues to this. We train the auditors, they do better, more effective audits, and no more procedural problems. But also I wanted to remind you that really the number 5, even though it's called the 5 whys, that's not a magic number. In practice, it may take more or fewer whys to get to where we want to be. Also, please remember, the facilitator should be recording all of the ideas and answers. It really would be pretty rare to have everybody on the team come up with the exact same answers to the question. I mean, the second question, for example, is why was the procedure not reviewed? Another team member might answer that as nobody has access to the procedure, which would lead us down a whole new line of whys. So you want to make sure you capture all of the answers given so the exercise can be its most effective. And you're going to likely find more than one cause that should be addressed. So just to reiterate, very likely you're going to need to do more than one effort. It may take more or less than 5 whys to get it done. And it's very important with all the tools we're going to talk about today, follow-up is essential. Whatever the team identifies as a cause and what actions are put into place to prevent this cause from rearing up again must be followed up on in the days and the weeks to follow. A couple of weeks to find that the fix either hasn't been put into place yet, or it wasn't as effective as we thought it was going to be, and the issue might still be lingering. So you want to make sure you do a really good follow-up. Our hand at a fishbone diagram. Officially, this is known as the Ishikawa diagram. I butchered his name, but it was named after a Japanese professor, Furu Ishikawa. The name, this idea back in the 1960s, 5 whys we saw earlier, the first step is the same. Name a facilitator and create a team to brainstorm the causes. Where this differs is the way the ideas are recorded. The tool here, how it's written down, you can see pretty quickly why it became the name fishbone stuck. So the facilitator would note the event or the problem as the fish head. Then the team, again, brainstorms ideas of causes that may have contributed to the problem. These are the major categories you see here. I have processes and people and products, equipment, etc. Anything the team wants.
David, can I get you to hold tight for a second? It's like the audio is having issues. David, can you hear us? Can you guys hear me? Let's see that we can keep this going here a little bit. David, you might need to refresh just to see if that solves your audio problem. Bear with us, people. We have time. It'll take him just a moment to refresh his screen. Bear with us. I'm not sure David's hearing me.